Hello, my name is Malik Abbasdab. Welcome to today's edition of Editors Forum. At Editors Forum, we assemble courageous, fearless journalists and editors who bring you unadulterated analysis and assessment of all the issues making the news and the major headlines in the week. And the week was a packed one. Very many explosive stories broke within the week. The major one coming on Friday. If you thought that an African court can't be assertive and confident, well, you thought wrong. The Kenyan Supreme Court took an unprecedented decision and nullified an election which was held on August 8. So Uhuru Kenyatta, who succeeded in winning the election, now has to come again because the court has nullified the election results and called for a rerun of the vote in 60 days' time. And of course, Senate won't go away. An officer of the trust has been found allegedly to have used fake documents to obtain his job. He was interdicted and subsequently kicked out of the trust. But that is not all. There are many other issues that broke within the week, and we'll be talking about the allegations made by a musician turned politician, A+, who said that two deputy chiefs of staff are asking for money before giving access to persons who want to see the president. He has been asked to substantiate those allegations. We will hear from our editors whether he has been able to produce any evidence to back these allegations. And of course, are the politicians engaged in ventriloquism? Because we have heard that the IMF program, the 3-year extended credit program, is being extended. Is that what the government promised? We will hear from our editors. And if we have time, we will talk about the deputy minister's gaffe that lost for him his job. Here is Editors Forum. My name is Malik Abbasdab. I'm sitting in for Gifty and Apia. When we come back from the break, I will introduce to you my editors and we will settle for this discussion. Keep watching. You're welcome. You're watching Editors Forum. My guests are to my immediate left, Richard Anekwe Abbey. He is with the Business and Financial Times. Richard, welcome to Editors Forum. This is your first time.
Sure.
And then, of course, George, I think this is George's second time, George Asekri. He is with Radio Ghana, Behind the News. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you very much, Malik.
Let me start with George. When you heard the decision of the Kenyan Supreme Court, what was your first reaction?
Unconsciously, I was like, wow, more work to journalists. Because I tabled the show for Saturday. And so when I heard it, I had to change everything.
Okay.
And it was like, wow, this is news.
Did you see that coming?
Not at all.
Why?
The election process, when you watch the international media, everything seems to have gone on well. In fact, for the first time in that country's history, we didn't hear on election day mass rigging per allegation that we used to hear in other elections. And coupled with the fact that all the election observer missions gave the election a thumb up. So I was kind of confused.
So you were not anticipating this verdict?
Not at all. Not at all.
Was your view informed? With the benefit of hindsight, would you say your view that given that all the observer missions had given this election a clean bill of health, and given that we hadn't heard what has obtained in the past about widespread irregularities and manipulation of the electoral process in that country, when you heard the decision of the court with the benefit of hindsight, would you say your view was misinformed?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. You see, Malik, political scientists will tell you that there is no perfect election anywhere. There is no election organized anywhere in the world where there have not been irregularities. Not at all. But to the extent that those irregularities will not prevent the person supposed to have won from getting that, then there's a problem. So yes, I expected those minor cases of irregularities, but not to overturn the verdict of the people.
And the Kenyan Supreme Court, let me come to you, Richard. The Kenyan Supreme Court answered 3 questions. The first question was, were the elections conducted in accordance with the principles of the Kenyan Constitution? The court said no. Were there irregularities in the electoral process? The court said yes. Were those irregularities substantial enough to affect the integrity of the election? The court said yes. 3 questions, the court answered all of them, and then eventually they nullified the results. Were you, as George, surprised by the outcome?
Well, Malik, you know, 2 days before the Supreme Court ruled, I was with some Kenyan friends. We're having this discussion, and I
in Ghana?
No, I was in South Africa.
Okay.
I just came last night, and we were having this discussion, and I mentioned to him, what's up with the elections? I mean, the petition. Is there any chance the opposition leader would have something?
That's Raila Odinga.
Raila Odinga. And he tells me that, I mean, they have faith in their judiciary, but, I mean, of course, he told me this is Africa and anything is possible. So, for me, I was keeping tabs on it. So, the day when the Supreme Court came out to David Maraga, the Chief Justice, to announce that the verdict has been overturned, I was
and by verdict, you are talking about the verdict of the electoral process.
The electoral
not
process.
The court case.
Not the court.
Yes.
Yes. So I was a bit surprised, and I sent him a WhatsApp, and I was like, whoa, what's happening here? And he told me that, look, I mean, like he said, they have faith in their judicial process because David Maraga is one person they have absolute trust in him. So they knew if it's supposed to be A, he's going to ensure that it is A. So for me, I mean, I wasn't there, and I've read about some of the things that happen and all that. So listening to him, he's being Kenyan, he interacting with the process, he telling me that, look, of course, there were some irregularities, but as to the scale, nobody could have, I mean, come up with that kind of explanation.
You are a journalist who is interested in digitization and digital stuff. And I know that even in our own electoral process some time back last year, you made efforts to try and help people, with you and a couple of others, to help people to check their voter, the activeness, the activity of their voter registration, whether they were active or not. When you heard that their systems were hacked, did that make you think again?
Well, I think that it was pretty a serious thing to happen. Having the man in charge of the IT system being abducted and killed. Of course, I mean, a whole lot of allegations would come in. People would make all sort of meanings into it. But, I mean, bottom line is the man was abducted and killed. Who did that?
Prior to the election.
Prior to the elections. Who did that? We don't know. But we know, in terms of IT systems, I mean, it's a whole lot of database and knowledge base. So if I am in charge of the let's say the process, I'm in charge of key systems, and you abduct me, first of all, we are talking about biometric details, and we don't know what may have happened before the man was killed. So, I mean, it's a process that anybody who knows very well can hijack it. I mean, it's an IT system, but it's manned by humans. So it's not something that you can say because it's IT, it's foolproof. I mean, the foolproof is where it interacts with human beings, and we don't know who is influencing who or who has undue advantage where to take advantage of the process.
We know that there were 7 justices sitting on this case.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was indisposed. So at the time that the judgment was given, it was a 5-4 majority decision. The 2 others, Njoki Ndungu and there is J.B. Ojang, they were those who dissented. They gave their dissenting opinion. Given what you said, do you think it's problematic that this was not a unanimous decision?
Yes, I think so. I think so, not because of the way it went, but the opposite. You see, I saw the problem from the prima facie case that was sent in there. You see, if you go to court with a petition and your respondents agree to adjudicate an issue that has to do with whether there were irregularities, I mean, how on earth are you going to justify that when you yourself admitted in your responses that in some number of constituencies there were problems?
But that's a factual matter. It's a matter of fact. if the fact is that there were irregularities, the respondents had no option but to agree.
Well, you don't have an option, but from the beginning, you could have made some objections to argue that yes, there were irregularities, but those irregularities were not enough to overturn the verdict of the people.
In fairness, that's what their argument was, because I remember, because I watched the submissions of the lead counsel for the respondents, and I'm talking about PLO Lumumba, and he argued strenuously that there were irregularities, but those irregularities were not to the extent that they will affect the integrity of the elections.
Well, I watched him, and respectfully, I thought he was not doing law. He was kind of doing poetry, being a motivational speaker and a lawyer at the time. If you look at the lawyer, lead counsel of Odinga, he was going for issues that you have very difficult to dispute. And look at the respondent. They were not unanimous. I mean the lawyers. They were giving conflicting figures at a certain point. And so when you raise issues of conflict in court, your credibility is at stake.
Is it not because it is possible that they just had a bad case?
Not really. I think they were not prepared. I think, Odinga had indicated that he wouldn't go to court. And so probably he had told his lawyers to be working. Probably. But maybe the professor...
But according to their constitution, George, they had 7 days after the declaration of results within which to bring a petition.
Yes.
And
but he had indicated that he wouldn't. So the question is, how come his lawyers were able to prepare a good case? And how come the respondents' lawyers were not? Because if they were, they wouldn't have been there with conflicting figures.
You think this matter boils down to the preparation and the competence of the lawyers?
I think so. For me, I think the respondent didn't get good lawyers.
Do you agree with him?
Well, I think that somehow the whole thing took everybody by surprise, because this is not the first time anybody is going to court on the basis of...
even in Kenya. This is not the first time.
So, I mean, obviously...
In fact, Odinga's petition has been thrown out before by the same court.
Yes, so obviously, I mean, somehow, somebody somewhere will be thinking that this is just going to end in the same thing. So whether we put up a show or not, this is something which is unprecedented. So, let's just put something together and we'll sail through. I mean, for me, that's how I'm seeing the whole process. And until the court made their decision and someone really got to know that, of course, I mean, this is possible. And this time around, the court had to rule to annul the elections.
Let's look at it in the context of Africa. Usually, and you were talking to a Kenyan who said, well, they have confidence in the judiciary, but this is Africa. There are those who say, well, this is a ray of hope in the African context. Do you share that view?
Well, I think so, because sadly, Africa has been stereotyped for all the wrong reasons, and one of the reasons why we've had a lot of dispute has to do with electoral process which went bad. So somehow, when you have electoral, people don't really get to buy into the results, and they go to court. You think that is a better option than to resort to violence. And we saw it in Ghana with the MPP petition, and then we've seen it with Raila Odinga. And I think that for me, it's something that we all need to cheer. We are buying into democracy, and we have to make sure that even if there are disputes, we have to use the lay-down processes to have our issues or our dispute properly resolved.
George, has Ghana things to learn from Kenya?
Well, everything that happens, good or bad, there's something to learn. But I don't think the Kenyan system is better than our system. Well, because I'm not there, I'm here. You see, in the Kenyan situation, Raila Odinga had disputed the electoral process from the beginning till the end.
Which is what every opposition does, because
but in Ghana, used the judiciary.
But in Ghana here, the same thing happened.
In Ghana, the same thing happened. But look, our case didn't go their way. You see, if you have a problem with every process, and you take the process to court, and the court gives judgment throughout, and elections are conducted, and the same court would give judgment of the processes, come to tell you that, look, elections were not held in accordance with the laws of Kenya. It is problematic.
How is that? because the Kenyan constitution stipulated processes by which to conduct the election.
Yes.
If those processes in the view of the court are not followed, then there's evidence to that effect.
But there's no evidence that all the processes were not followed.
Well, the case was not about all of the processes. The
Yes.
case were the elections conducted in accordance with the principles, even if some of the principles. The court's view was that no. And were there irregularities? The court said yes, because
Yes.
there were evidence of irregularities. And you just pointed out that even the respondents agreed that there were irregularities.
It brings to mind when we were having our case here in Ghana, and I sat through the Supreme Court, the 8 months. At a point, I was asking myself, the very fact that some people are learned lawyers and justices, does that mean they are expert when it comes to democratic elections?
No, they are not. What lawyers
And
judges,
that was my serious problem.
What judges,
Malik,
judges,
You see, every politician, democratic expert, will tell you that in elections, irregularities are bound to happen. So if you are a justice
No,
of a
but
Supreme
you see,
Court,
George, I mean, I think that what we have to agree, how long were we in court?
8 months.
8 months. How long have they been in court?
2
They had their
weeks.
elections in, I think,
8th of August,
8th of
yes.
August. And
by August 31st,
and you see-
the determination had been made. So within 3 weeks, they had determined the matter.
And you see, let's look at what happened within the 8 months of the election petition. The uncertainty, the businesses that were lost and all that. I think that doesn't help anybody. Disputes would arise, I mean, every now and then when there are elections. But what we should do is to have processes which make sure that these disputes are sorted as soon as possible so that you can deal with all these uncertainties. Because 8 months in court is revenue wasted as far as the TV stations are concerned, foreign direct investments, you are going to lose all of them because people don't know where it's going to.
well,
He has a valid
So I
point.
think
there.
that
it's
it's
you
something
got a
that we
valid
need to
point,
really-
but I think that sometimes it is better to take time. Look, when the elections were announced here in Ghana, I was assigned to cover the press conference by the NPP at Alisa. And when now Vice President came out to give, catalog cases of irregular, including my own constituency. And I knew the number of polling stations in my constituency. The figure he gave wasn't the case, so I was like, probably you didn't tally all the polling stations.
No, but, you see,
But I'm coming. But after listening to the Vice President, I was disturbed. I was like, wow, this roared in Ghana. But sitting in the Supreme Court for 8 months, at a point I realized that, look, some of them were over exaggeration. So assuming I was a die-hard member of the NPP and the Ghanaian court had used 2 weeks to rule the way it went, I wouldn't have been happy. But sitting in the court throughout the 8 months, I appreciated the verdict.
So you think that we should stick to our process?
I think so.
well, I think that what we did effectively during the election petition was to audit the electoral process. And it wasn't necessary, I won't say it wasn't necessary, but we could have used a different platform or a different channel to look at where to enhance our processes. And I think that, like I was saying initially, 8 months in court was just too long. I mean, we have a country to run, and businesses are looking at where the government is going to make their decision and all that, and you have people going back and forth looking at the validity of a pink sheet or not. I don't think we should go there.
Even President John Mahama complained that the period was so long that it affected the outcome of, his government performance.
I
of
don't
course,
think
the
that
evidence,
I don't
the
think that
evidence don't
complaint
bear
was-
him out,
yes.
because if you look at the growth of the economy, 2013 was certainly far better than the subsequent years. Be
Besides,
that
he
as
was
it may,
working.
the president still complained.
That he was
That
president, he was
affected.
appointing ministers,
No,
he was working.
no, but
it
you
isn't that
would-
the state
but
had
you
become
see-
standstill.
But you see, what would have happened if the court decision had gone against President John Mahama?
Elections will be held. He will spearhead the elections.
So what would we have done? We would have made a lot of expenses that probably would have to just go back to zero. Do you get it? So I think that if we had done this within, let's say, 2 weeks, it's very easy for you to count your cost or count your losses and start all over
And
again.
then it's
That
actually
8
done in
months.
such a way that the president is not sworn in now before a decision is being made by the court that the election is nullified.
Yes.
That is the good thing about their system. And so if, in our case, the laws allows that you should swear the person in as president whilst adjudication takes place. But their case is not like that. So Uhuru was just president-elect, even though he was still the sitting president. I don't know whether he's still president or not. But you see, their case is different, our case is different. And we in Ghana here, we know, probably because we are in the media, we know the processes. And we know that, yes, we love ourselves, despite the fact that we talk when it comes to politics. So we are able to appreciate the extent of irregularities in our system. We don't know much about their system. But you see, Malik, I was asking myself, assuming President Kenyatta wasn't a gentle guy, if he had been a tyrant, quote unquote, within the 4 years, will the justices still be that courageous to come out with this? And I'm asking whether that will be enough to make our presidents on the continent humble and approachable the way they are. If you've studied Kenyatta, he's somebody who appears to be approachable. If I would do that and a petition comes and you kick against my authority, will that motivate people like Mugabe and others?
Before Kenyatta became president, he was nobody.
Sure.
Would he have wanted a president who would have had a control over the judiciary?
That is not what I'm saying.
No, but if you are saying that the decision would then signal African leaders that they shouldn't be mild and they shouldn't be malleable and they shouldn't be tolerant and they should use iron hands, and that if they were to abide by democratic practices, i.e. have an independent judiciary which cannot be intimidated, then when they win elections, their elections can be overturned.
No, just thinking
but you see, George, I mean, what I get, you listen to David Maraga, he's not anybody who you can easily push into submission. He's very courageous and he's very principled. Here's this guy who Uhuru Kenyatta went to his, I think one of his hometown to campaign, and was like, okay, vote for me because I gave your son a job. And he told him, look, you didn't give me a job. It's not about a project you are working on. I'm doing my job, and it's not like you gave me the job. Do you get it? So he's somebody who is, I mean, doesn't care who's us is God or something, and he will say it as it is. Do you get it? So this man, I think that we've got to give him the credit.
And Josh, shouldn't we want that even if you are the president and you are a beneficiary of an illegal process or an unlawful process or a flawed process, we should have a court which should be able to say no.
To the extent that
as Africans, shouldn't we advocate for that?
To the extent that that is the actual thing on the ground.
So you are disagreeing with the 4 justices of the Supreme Court? I am disagreeing
with the ruling of the Kenyan Supreme Court.
Why?
Because, look, let's take our election observer missions, and I'm not saying they have the credibility to organize elections. These are people who came out to tell the world that everything was okay.
Do you think that they were capable of making a determination?
Remember, some time past, these same election observer groups said elections in Zimbabwe were fraudulent, and the whole world took that.
No, but
as against what the constitution, the constitutional bodies in Zimbabwe said.
See, what you have to understand, we are talking about a constitutional process. We are talking about an election, and a constitutional process gives you the right to go and seek for review if you think that the processes were not free and fair. There's no mention of what is said by the electoral.
Other people have said.
You can actually hold elections without observer missions, and it will still be free and fair. Do you get it? So I think that what the Supreme Court did was within its right, within its power. So if somebody did not agree with the processes, with the results, they have every right to go to the Supreme Court and seek for redress. And I think that's what they
so back to the court.
And George, you have to remember that observer missions have to just observe things on the face value.
Sure.
And make their pronouncement on the basis of that.
Sure.
Nothing more.
Sure.
Observer missions are incapable.
Yes.
Incapable of determining or detecting the nature of certain actions which may affect the outcome of the elections. So the observer missions may have said something, but that does not preclude the court from holding otherwise.
It is like every scientific election anywhere, I mean scientific research anywhere in the world. You don't talk to everybody. You take a sample, and based on that you generalize. And we are able to, based on that, determine credibility. Yes, sometimes you are wrong, but sometimes you are right.
Yes,
but to the extent that these observers, assuming they had worked with the sample, and they all came out to say this sample is good. I'm just looking aloud, I mean thinking aloud. If these people have done that elsewhere in the past, and we have said based on that, certain precedents were not legitimate. And I'm particular about Zimbabwe. You think this could have happened in Algeria?
But you see, it doesn't matter what they have said in the past. What we have to know is the Supreme Court as part of the electoral process. That's why they can step in and say, look, we think that these processes were not free and fair, or they were not credible, and they affected the results.
So George, if for example, I mean, take our own case. Yes. There were allegations that the processes to transmit results electronically had been hacked.
Yes.
Of course, subsequently we know that has not been supported by any evidence. Yes. But if what is happening in the Kenyan case, it is true, and Richard just told us about the person who was in charge of the electoral process in terms of the electronic transmission of results, and this person was abducted and killed. And subsequently, I have been reading suggestions and publications that said unauthorized people had access to the system. How could the observer missions see that? And how can we say that because they said the electoral process was fair, what they said was sacrosanct?
It may not be sacrosanct, but look at we call it electoral process. It doesn't end on the voting day. It is a process. And in the Kenyan situation, the processes were disputed till the last stage. The only stage that had not been disputed until now was the voting day.
Is it
so? If everything was all right per the court rulings of cases brought before it by Odinga and co, was anything to go by? How come this same court will come and tell us that on that day, in fact, the court didn't say election day, the court said the process. Well, they are telling us that 21 days they'll bring out the full judgment.
They're saying that was the election conducted
in accordance with the laws of Kenya,
with the principles of the Constitution. And they said no, that there's a plethora, there's a preponderance of evidence showing that that was not the case.
I mean, you see, Malik, when we talk about the principles of the Constitution, it's only the Supreme Court which has the right or the power to interpret some of these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I said. So it's not within the powers of the observer mission. They can just go in there to look at how the voting process is going, but really they don't have the power to even pronounce that this particular process was flouted and is against the court. No. That falls within the ambit of the Supreme Court.
And they exercised it.
Perfectly. So I think that for me, they did their job, and we must commend them.
You must commend the observer missions?
No, I'm talking about the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court.
Well, of course, to the extent that they are courageous, we must commend them. But let's look at the implication of the ruling. One, you are supposed to conduct elections within 60 days.
Yeah.
Do we know the state of the Kenyan economy?
Well, it doesn't really matter because I mean, whatever.
Are we now to elevate cost over due process?
I'm just asking questions. You see, Kenya's situation is different from ours. Look, the Kikuyu tribe, from which President Kenyatta comes from,
yes, the Kikuyu,
is the majority. And we know ethnicity is a major factor in the Kenyan process. In fact, in their elections.
Well, I mean, you see, you are going to, I mean, the merits and all.
It's not about. No, this is not the case.
I mean,
let's
look at it on the face of it. The court ruled that the election must be, I mean, reorganized or whatever they have to do within 60 days. Do you get it? So, I mean, it's not for us to sit here and determine whether the economy is sound or not.
The court doesn't control the coffers. So if Kenyatta comes to tell us that we don't have enough money to run elections, will the court still compel him to do it?
Then you are saying that you can wake up one day, there's a general election, they say, I don't have money.
Yeah. And or even if the election were to be flawed, because we don't have money,
democracy is expensive.
Allow the flawed election to stand.
The evidence on the ground do not support
You see, the thing is, what you have to know.
Evidence was adduced before 6 Supreme Court judges 4 of them.
As to whether you
Four
want
of
4
them-
people to determine your fate.
So you
No,
are,
in
you
a
are
country.
making
No, you see, I think that's very wrong.
That cannot be wrong.
The
That is your opinion.
The people,
So why did the Kenyan Constitution make a provision for selected individuals at the Supreme Court to adjudicate an election petition? And remember, once the court has provided for this process, it means that there can be one of 2 outcomes. Either they annul the results or they uphold it. If that process was not sensible, why did the Constitution provide
That is
for
why
it?
we are told that democracy is not the best form of government, just that there is no better alternative.
Absolutely, right. Then that being the case, if the democratic principles permit that you should have a constitution, and that constitution makes a provision that says that after the conduct and declaration of election results, if you disagree, you bring a petition. And when you bring a petition, some selected people will adjudicate it, and they can annul the results or uphold it. After they have annulled the results, we cannot now come and make Kenyatta's argument and say, why are just a few
Malik,
people deciding for the Ghanaian
you
people?
have enough knowledge when it comes to legal things. We don't go to court to win necessarily based on the truth, but the fact. And we know the truth isn't the same as the
No,
fact.
but well, you see, truth is subjective. My truth may vary from his truth, which may vary from your truth.
Yes.
That is why we
But
have to
there's the
depend.
ultimate truth.
That is why we have to depend
On
on
the fact.
facts,
Yes.
because the facts are sacred, they are sacrosanct, they are verifiable. So when we depend on the facts, they are neutral. They are not anybody's truth.
So I go to court with him. Okay, we are lawyers. And you say, how many
Courts
police
don't
stations?
determine truth; they determine facts and
Yes,
law.
yes. So we go to court. I am a respondent for, say, Kenyatta. Then I
And
tell
you come
that
to court and agree
tell
with
that
him that there were
330,000
irregularities in the election.
I come to tell the court that 330,000 cases of irregularities were there. He is lawyer for Electoral Commission, comes to that 230,000. The court will automatically tell us that from the respondent side, there's issue of credibility.
No, what actually happens is that the court doesn't just hear what you say. The court sees the evidence.
The
And
evidence.
the evidence is built on facts,
Yes.
George. So when the court sees your evidence, and on matters such as this is a civil matter, the court will weigh the evidence. So the petitioners have brought their evidence, the respondents have brought their counter evidence. They will put both evidences on a scale and weigh them, which one is weightier. In this case, the case of the petitioners was weightier, so they won.
They
on the
won.
basis of evidence, not truth,
Not truth.
facts and law.
And it takes me back to the classroom. After election petition here in Ghana, there was a seminar for journalism. And it was appeal court justices and some from the Supreme Court. And the first question I asked was, is it how coherent a lawyer is, how good the case is, or the justice's knowledge of the issue that determines the ultimate outcome? And one justice said, all.
Yes, everything. Because you have to remember, George, that earlier you were talking about the competence of the justices and whether
Yes.
they are they are professionals in elections. No, they are not professional in elections. They are professional in the application of law to evidence. That's what they do. That's what their job is. You bring the evidence, they apply it. That is why they set out questions. Were the elections conducted in accordance with the principles of the Constitution? They know the principles of the Constitution better than anyone,
Yes.
because that's their job. When you bring them evidence and they look at the evidence and they say, given this evidence, would you say that the elections were conducted in accordance with the Constitution? The answer is no.
Question
Because
then
they have
is-
seen the evidence and they think that if these things happen, you cannot say that this election was conducted in accordance
Question
with the
then
principles of the
is,
Constitution.
the one we are expecting, the impending election, do you see anything that portrays that we're going to have elections that will go in line with the spirit and letter of the Kenyan Constitution?
Because the expectation is that the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Board or Commission of the Kenyan people, after this judgment has been given, conduct the elections in accordance with the principles
Yeah,
of the
so
Constitution.
Is
because they
that
have a mandate
possible?
to
Has
do
it ever
that.
happened anywhere in the
No,
world?
you see, I think that you are going to the realm of, I mean, abstract and all that. We can't have an election which is
Perfect.
We can't.
100%. But we are looking at the scale and magnitude of the irregularities. Were they enough to affect the overall outcome? And in this case, that's what the Supreme Court is telling us, that whatever happened was enough to tilt the results towards one side. So, no, stop everything, go back and do everything afresh.
Let's move forward, Richard, shall we? After the verdict was given, we heard one of the lawyers for the respondents tell the court that this is a political decision, and that they had, by taking that decision, overturned the sovereign will of the Kenyan people. Would you say those were fair comments?
Well, when we say sovereign will of the people, I think that the Supreme Court, the justices over there, are not representing themselves. They are representing the people as well. So I don't think that we can isolate them from the process. Much as, I mean, we know how elections are conducted and how people are supposed to vote and all that. We can't speak as if the Supreme Court is an isolation of the process. They are key stakeholders of the process. So if they think that the process is not going as it's supposed to be and people petition them, they have every right to call for, I mean, fresh elections. And
George,
that's
do
what
you
they did.
think that the judges, the lawyers' opinion and views engendered peace?
Well,
Was it setting up the public against the court?
no, I think they were all matured in the process. And so that probably is responsible for the peace. Of course, you should expect the lawyer to disagree when the ruling did not go in his
but
favor.
to say that the judges took a political decision
That
and
is-
overturning the sovereign will of the people,
That is
that not instigating the general public against the judges?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. That is his opinion. And I would have shared that, even though at that level I disagree with him. If I were him, I would say same. Because why would somebody's misconduct, say in a certain constituency or region, lead to you annulling my vote in another region? Remember, the court did not say that in some, we don't have all the ruling, so we are unable to go into details. But we are not told whether the irregularities were widespread in all the constituencies in the
They
country.
don't have to be. They just have to be substantial.
So
enough
if they
to
were
affect
substantial-
the integrity.
If-
Remember, the
if-
integrity of the election is one.
Yes.
Genuine.
So
the
if
integrity.
that's the case,
So it
then
doesn't have to be wrong everywhere.
that is why we were comparing it to a Ghanaian case. If that is the case, then we should be able to tell the people that, look, these were the areas where we had widespread irregularities. And so let's reconduct the election in those areas and not the entire country.
We also know that Raila Odinga, after the verdict, said that the election officers who presided over these flawed elections should be prosecuted.
Well, he has a point. To the extent that he has won the case, he has every reason, because the Kenyan economy is going to suffer as a result of those individuals. So if he said they should be prosecuted, I agree. My problem with him is, in 2007, you went to court. It didn't go your way. What happened? Lives were lost. Today, it has come to your way, and you are expecting peace from the other side. Is that fair?
Well, but you can't blame the disturbances in 2007 in areas like Kisumu and those places on him.
Who should we blame? Did he
No,
call
but
on them
I
to
think
stop?
that, you see, I think that whatever it is, lives have been lost, and Kenya as a country have moved beyond that. And they saw that violence is actually not a way to go. So that's how come this time around they went back to court again to make sure that the right thing is done. And thankfully, they had a verdict that went went their way. So I think that, first of all, going back to the comment the opposition lawyer said, is it opposition leader?
Yes,
or?
the respondent's lawyer, one of
The
the respondent
respondent.
lawyers. That's
And I think that for me, you listen to him, I mean, your supporters are clearly disappointed in the verdict by the court. So somehow you would want to say something to appease them, but when we analyze what
but
he
in
said.
the case of Ghana, after the judgment was delivered, Philip Addison just stood up and said, my laws, we are grateful.
Yes. Philip is a matured lawyer, and so you should expect that from him. I'm not too sure every lawyer would have said that. Even the President of the Republic, current, when he came out and addressed journalists, if you were there, a lot of the MPP bigwigs were not happy. Chances were that if he had gone to consult them, they would tell him not to say so.
Why?
So this is individual based. Some people.
Why do you think people were not happy with the president's, with then opposition leaders?
Yeah.
What did he say that they were not happy with?
When he admitted, when he said, I disagree with you, but let's go on. People were not happy. For some people, or to some people, he should have appealed the decision. To some people,
he should
yes.
have sought a review.
Yes. But he said, no, let's move on as a country.
And you see,
I'm not too sure all the candidates would have said same if they had been in Nana's shoes at the time.
No, but you see, one thing also that helped, we had the benefit of time. 8 months was long enough time for you to have gone over your decision over and over again. So, but unlike the Kenyan situation, theirs was, everything was, the wound was just fresh, and of course, people were still hurt. But for Ghana, you could see that people had somehow gone over the electoral defeat and all that. Although they were still in court, they knew, it was more of, fighting I wouldn't say a lost cause though, but they knew, it could go against them. So
you're watching Editors Forum. My guests are Richard Anekwe Abe, George Asekiri. We are talking about the Kenyan case and the trouble or the decision of the highest court of that country that annulled. It was a landmark decision, if you ask me, because the court came out and said by a majority decision 4-2, 4 justices held the view that the elections in that country were not conducted in accordance with the principles of the Kenyan constitution, I think a 2010 constitution, and that there were widespread irregularities, and they were to such extent and nature that they affected the integrity of the election, and therefore the electoral results as declared by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission was annulled, and then they have to conduct fresh elections in 60 days time. That's what we have been talking about. We have looked at what the justices said, what the dissenting opinions were. 2 judges, they dissented from the decision of the court. They held that, look, to the extent that this election was held, and in fact, they actually quoted the decisions and opinions expressed by some of the observer missions and say, we cannot, after this verdict has been given by observer missions, come and say the election was not conducted properly. Well, they lost. And the way the courts work is that the majority decision is binding on everyone. It's a decision of the court, actually. So it is a decision of not just the 4 justices, but the decision of the court. You're watching Editors Forum. We are taking a short break. When we come back, we will talk in Senate, and then we will talk about the comments of a deputy minister that lost him his job. There are many other issues that we will talk about when we come back from this break. You're welcome back. You're watching Editors Forum, and we are talking the Kenyan situation. We are talking Senate. We are talking Flagstaff House. We are talking IMF extension. And of course, we are talking about the deputy minister's gaffe, which lost him his job. Are we just pretentious, or these are things all of us see? Let's talk about Senate, because this is a story which won't go away. George, Richard, Senate. You are a business reporter. You report for the Business and Financial Times. When you heard the Senate story break, were you one of the people surprised, or one of the people said, deja vu, this was long coming?
Well, I always get, it's funny, listening to some of these stories coming from Senate. When I heard the story, first thing that struck me, we have, our Senate, they have a lot of investment. They have invested in a lot of sectors that sometimes you really would not want to even go into the economics of it.
We hear 46% of their investments don't make any profit.
I'm not surprised. Trust me, I'm not surprised, because you look at their portfolio, there are some that I wouldn't invest my money, not to talk about pensioners' money into it, because these are,
Give us examples.
well, for instance, hotels. I mean, the hospitality sector, it's one place where, I mean, it's seasonal, and it's very difficult to, I mean, keep your margins at an appreciable level.
But big hotels are coming up. Mavenpick came when, not too long ago.
And they've changed ownership. Do you know that?
Well,
They've changed ownership. I can go to, let's say, for instance, Novotel. They've also changed ownership. I mean, I can give you a lot of examples.
Novotel is now Accra City Hotel. Kempinski just came up. So if it's not profitable, why are people investing in it?
Well, I think that it's a problematic sector, and I mean, the margins are very small. It's just like the airline or the air transport industry. I mean, it's one area where the margins are very small, and SNIT has investment in that sector as well. So, I mean, I don't really want to go into some of the investment they have made. To me, honestly, some do not really make sense, and I don't know how some of these things are, I mean, arrived at. But be that as it may, on the issue of the Iyoko thing, first of all, let's talk about the 72 million OBX.
Yes. That their operating system, their software
operating
system.
business, what they call it. For me, when I heard about the 32 million initial amount,
The 34.
34 initial amount, I was a bit jittery because I didn't want to look at it within the scope of the other bidders who came up with 9 million and all that. First of all, we should understand the scope of what.
Because Faisal bidded for 17 million Ghana cedis.
Yes, but first
They
of all,
didn't get it.
yes, I don't.
We are
really-
told that they didn't understand the process. That's why they
Exactly. So let's say I have a house to build, and I say, okay, I want to build a 3-bedroom house. I needed this furniture. I need this, that. Everything is part of my scope. So if you don't understand, you may probably give me a quote lesser than. It doesn't make it right for me to give it to you. It's not about how much you're quoting. It's about you understanding the needs and the requirement of what I want.
They have insisted that they understood it. Their partners were
you see,
partners were actually global companies that are delivering on softwares. In fact, the people who got the contract, they have never done this kind of social security software before.
You see, Malik, one thing too that you should, I want to hear from the PESO guys. Did they use PPA? Did they go for a review?
They spoke on Joy FM's Super Morning Show. The person guys spoke on Joy FM's Super Morning Show. And that's where they debunked the assertion that they didn't understand the process. They actually said that their partners had been handling social security systems in the US, in many other developed countries.
No,
so they said they understood.
But you see, Malik, you know, when you look at the Public Procurement Act 663, I won't sit here to say I'm a procurement expert. I know I'm not. But I think when you look at the process, I mean, they have every right to go for a review. They can go and see if there was some anomaly or some faults somewhere with the process. I don't know whether they did that or not, so I don't want to even go into it. But with the $34 million contract, I think that, first of all, where I have a problem with, I don't want to go into the procurement process. Where I have a problem is with SNIT. Because for the cost to go up, it means that somebody got the scope wrong. If I come to you and I agree with you, build me a 3-bedroom house, and I build it for you, and you come back and tell me, no, I don't want a 3-bedroom house, make it 4. There's no way I'm going to factor into the original cost. I'm going to give you a new bill. Do you get it? And as far as I'm concerned, that is what happened with the SNIT issue.
They have disagreed that they got the scoping wrong. They said
No,
that
SNIT got it wrong because, I mean, in project management, I mean, basic project management, they have something they call scope control. You agree the scope with the project financier. So we all agree it's a 3-bedroom house, bottom line. Every bit of the scope is agreed. And there's a scope control process. So the scope control process is more or less like a board. So anytime you want to change part of the scope, it would have to go through a scope control process. And once it goes through the scope control process, it means it would affect cost and
timelines and all of that.
So it means that you would have to pay. So once they come with scope change, it means that people, SNIT would have to pay. So we would have to go back to SNIT and ask them, so how come you got your scope wrong? Because for every scope they change, it costs the taxpayer money.
George, we know that the head of IT, Yoko, claims used fake certificates to get a job. So we know that he's now been interdicted and actually dismissed. There are those who said that process was not in accordance with due process of law.
Malik, When I first heard of this SNIT scandal, my mind went back to secondary school. A book I read titled Ghana Enrollings Factor. In there, the author mentioned something like state protected thieves. So you have state protected thieves in the system. That for me was the problem. Before even the IT, what was it? You want a software that will take information from workers, store it and retrieve it. And that moves from 34 to 66 to 72.
And we are still paying.
If it were those workers, those management, their own business, would they have done that? Certainly no. So whether they went through the scope here or not, for me isn't the issue. I think that some people deliberately wanted to make money out of the workers of Ghana. But
you
for
don't
the
have any evidence to that.
Well, that is what they are investigating. I'm only suspecting.
Well, I think that, what makes the process very murkier is the fact that, let's go back to the scope again. You know, if, for instance, they had said, we want to do A, B, C, D, and we want to use 72 million, probably eyes would have been raised. I hope you're getting my point. So they say 34 million, and somehow 74, is it 74 or 72 million? 72 is double of the original amount. And who was auditing that process?
More than double, actually.
More than double of that amount. 68, right? So who was auditing the process? Because, when we are all bidding, it's very easy for people to raise questions and all that. But now the process had started, and you are making requests. And so now it's more of pay as you go now. Initially, people will be querying the process. But now that you are talking about scope, it means that you are not going through the competitive process anymore.
Brasimus has said that somewhere along the line during the implementation of this system, Senate contacted IBM to come and audit the process. And Brasimus' view is that IBM are the vendor for the company which was implementing the process. And after the assessment, they said you have to buy more equipment. And Brasimus' view is that that is not surprising, because if they recommend that you should buy more equipment, you are going to go back to the company which is supplying you the things, and the company will have to come to them and buy from them. So you're actually providing them with an opportunity to tell you that you should do more business with them. And he said it didn't make any sense. He actually says that they bought an equipment which cost $16,000. The Senate paid $500,000 for that.
You see, Malik, let's try to make this thing simple for people to understand. It's like you are building a house. You've given the house to somebody on contract. It's going to take you 34 million cedis to build. You've agreed. Others have gone through the processes. You didn't give it to them because to you, they didn't meet your criteria. The person who met it, you gave him this amount, 34, to do the work. Before he could finish the whole house, he tells you that we need ABC to add up. Then you will agree to pay more.
No, you see, the problem is, he didn't say they want ABCD to finish the house.
They said they wanted to add.
The change request came from SNIT.
Yes.
Because if the change request had come from the people, the contractors, they would have to bear the cost. Because if I give you money to build a house for me, and you go and buy materials I don't like, you would have to go back and get me my materials. No two ways about it. But if SNIT tells you, use this material, and I go and buy it, and it's not what you want, I won't pay, you would have to bear the cost. So that's how come SNIT was paying those monies extra.
Substantially, the OBS didn't change. The main focus of the work didn't change. So for you to double the amount in trying to shape the process is questionable.
What do you make of Dr. Caleb's problems?
Well, I think that, you see, the problem we are having to solve, with all these, has to do with leadership. Do you get it? It means that the person in charge did not know his job. And of course, it wasn't surprising that it came out that the man had fake degree certificates.
But we don't know that for a fact.
But he's been interdicted.
Well, that's Yuko's decision.
And even SNIT has come out to say that, the man has been fired or whatever.
There are those who say that process is not is not proper.
Well, I think that for whatever it is, I mean, it's still a shame because when we look at SNET, an organization like SNET, the brain, the engine room of SNET is the information system. No two ways about it. And for us to even have somebody whose credibility is in doubt with all these allegations or whatever flying around him, I think it doesn't augur well for SNET as an institution. Because management information systems, what the man was doing was like the engine room of all that there is to SNET. And for us to question its credibility, I think there's a problem, and the issue of the OBS malfunctioning and not working properly also ties into it.
And as Thompson has agreed, he says the system is working.
Malik, this IT guy, I have a problem with the way we are handling it. I may sound controversial. Look, I don't think there's any profession anywhere in the world that is superior to the other or inferior to others. Take us here in Ghana, journalism. One of the finest journalists we have in Ghana is Kweku Bako. What is his level of paper training when it comes to journalism? Are you telling me that he's not performing? So question is, was the guy performing?
No.
We haven't established that. Let me finish. And we have been told that this guy has moved from A, B, C. Do we have evidence that where he worked in the past, he was fired because of underperformance?
Okay, George, I think the issue is not necessarily about his performance. The issue is about claims. If you come to the multimedia group, George, and you have just a diploma, and you come, and we are even taking master's holders, and you come with a diploma and say, I have a diploma, but I have a better experience and in terms of job experience than your master's holders. That is an entirely different ball game from when you come and tell us that you have a PhD when you don't have it. So the issue is not about his performance and whether he knows the issues, whether he understands them. The issue is about what representation did he make to the people who gave him the job. If he made representations which are later found out to be false, then he has defrauded by false pretenses, and which is a criminal offense. And to that extent, he can be dealt with.
Agreed. But as we speak, we are not there yet. The guy says he has a PhD. Just that he graduated sometime and later the school was closed down. And so why should he be blamed? For now, we can't independently verify the truth or otherwise.
Now, I'm just saying this in response to your suggestion, your comparison.
Yes, my comparison
is suggesting that, well,
yes,
even if he doesn't have the certificates, that's the understanding I got. Even if he doesn't have the certificates and he knows his job, let's not worry too much about it.
Let's then ask ourselves as people, as Ghanaians, what do we want? It is good to have the certificate
and
be able
honest
to perform.
people who will not claim that they have things they don't have.
Yes.
I think that
we want honest people, but as it is premature to say somebody is dishonest.
But you see, I think that the role of MIS in an institution like SNET is something we should never toy with. Not for the least. You know, I find it difficult trying to even explain MIS to people. But let me simplify it. You know, MIS is like the software of an organization. So you have, let's say, an organization like SNET, how pensioners are paid, what time they should be paid, and I mean, that kind of software, you know, I mean, is the engine, the lifeblood of the organization. And everybody or anybody or anyone put there, you should never have a single blemish about the person.
So question is,
it's
do you need to have a PhD to be able to manage that?
No, it's not about having
do you claim that you have a PhD which people think, or which some say there's evidence that you don't have? That's the issue. The issue is not about whether he should have been there or not.
I agree with that, but my question is just, my problem is, as a people, moving forward, should we be looking at competence or mere certificate? Remember, we have engineers trained, mechanical engineers.
I think what we are looking at here is not
about.
I think George is missing the point. What we are looking at is not what he has.
I
what
agree.
we are looking
I'm only
at
saying that
is
moving
what
forward,
representation he has made.
Moving forward, because with whatever representation the guy has made, we cannot verify that, and we haven't verified that. It is SNET's word against the guy's word, or our word against his word.
So
no, but SNET is the employer.
We can't rely on either side.
SNET has said the guy put up.
Are you going to choose what he said over SNET?
Are we going to tell Ghanaians that SNET as an entity will employ people without verifying?
That's what the board has
well,
said.
I think
so for me, if there's a problem with that, then those who employ the guy should rather be punished and not the guy.
Yeah, so
SNET
You see,
So,
George, you see,
assuming, okay, but let's go with let's go with what you just said.
Yes.
If it is found out that the certificates he presented were actually fake, the people who employed him should be punished and not him. So should we leave him to keep his job?
Well, we shouldn't leave him, but the punishment, I think a chunk should go to the employers.
no, but you see, I think there are two angles to this. Those who employed him and the man himself. Everybody is culpable. The employers and the man. And where do we start from? First of all, Smith should know for a very sensitive position like general manager of MIS, you shouldn't toy with it. And how come you employ somebody to that sensitive position, you didn't do due diligence? And it brings us to the other issue where we're talking about the quality of their investment. I mean, if you can employ somebody without doing that basic due diligence, I mean, how come you would go and invest into an area which requires more?
Because we are told that they were investing in they invested some $150 million into some housing project, and then they waived value for money audit. They had originally intended to do it. A board meeting had been held. They decided to do this, and then at another board meeting, they waived it. So for me, I'm really not surprised. And for all you know, I don't want to speculate, but I mean, either somebody then don't.
Okay, so let me not go there. But I think that we have to really be serious about some of these things we do in this country. Employing somebody to MIS of SNET is a very serious job. You shouldn't just employ the person and for us to wake up one day, the bachelor's is fake, the master's, a PhD. I mean, it's embarrassing. Even if it turns out that the man actually has all these certificates and you are even telling us he doesn't, it's embarrassing. Why would you make such a mistake? Do you get it? So, I mean, I think we have to get serious about
Judge, your final comments on
My
this.
final question, we should move beyond targeting the politicians. The civil servants are doing a lot of things underground, and we should focus on them. Senate should be an eye-opener.
Okay, this should be an eye-opener that the civil servants have, they commit more infractions than the politicians do. That's George's view. Watching Editors Forum, and we are talking Senate. We have discussed the Kenyan situation.